It's now my great pleasure to introduce Luke Jenkins from Heneb, who's going to be talking about Pendinas. And those of you who live in Aberystwyth know Pendinas already. Those of you who drove from the south will have spotted Pendinas on the skyline on your way into Aberystwyth. And Luke's going to tell us about the project that we've been doing with the community in Aberystwyth and jointly with the people from the Royal Commission over the last few years, and which concluded last year.
Today, as has been introduced, I'm going to talk about Pendinas. Probably it needs no introduction in this part of the world. The site itself, I'll say a little bit about the project, and I can see that there are a lot of people who volunteered on the project in the audience, which is fantastic to see. The project was a 2-year National Lottery Fund project, which was done by Dyfed Archaeological Trust, now Heneb, in partnership with the Royal Commission, and with the support of CADU, I should notice. And it was a project that was very much led by the community and sort of thought up by the community to some extent, the community of Benparcau in particular at the south of the hill, at the base of the hill. And I'd just like to start by saying I am going to talk an awful lot about excavations today, which is what I know about, is what my involvement with the project was. But importantly, the excavations were about 2 months in a more than 2-year project. And actually what we did were several festivals, talks and walks, geophysical surveys, topographical surveys, 3D models, and that more than 2 years worth of community engagement. This was led by the fantastic Becca of the Royal Commission, who is now in London, I believe, doing her Masters. She did the most amazing jobs. And just to show the sort of participation that we were sort of seeing from the community, this was the opening event on the first day of the project. These were some of the sort of walks and talks up the mountain. This is the second archaeological festival. Got me in the middle there gesticulating at a Roman, and a nice cake and the local MP. It was a really, really fantastic event. This is Morgan of Mercia blowing a carnix on top of the hill, which was quite a spectacular thing to see. It sounds a bit like a sort of a cow giving birth, if you ask me. There we go. And here we go, and lots of vegetation clearance as well. It's important to note that Pendinas is an archaeological monument. It's a protected archaeological monument. It's a scheduled monument, but it's also a wildlife reserve. And that was a big part of the project, was to incorporate that. And on top there is an acid grassland, which is quite important. And Becca and the team did a lot of clearance all around the place with the assistance of the County Council and the County Council psychologists to actually improve the pasture and leave a site that was in better condition than it was when we started. Now, I'm very glad that I don't have to talk about 5,500 years worth of archaeology. I'm mostly talking about the Iron Age. In fact, I'm exclusively talking about the Iron Age, but I will run you through it in quite some detail. So what is a hill fort? We've heard it bandied around several times today. I don't think anyone actually went into what it is beyond an enclosure. This is the dictionary definition. I'm not going to read it out to you, but you will notice it's not actually very useful. It's just saying it's basically a fortification on a hill. I include here 2 examples of hill forts just to demonstrate how bad that definition is. This is Maiden Castle in the south of England, which is 55 hectares across. It has ditches 30 metres deep, several miles long, 3 layers thick. This is Castell Henllys in Pembrokeshire, which is one that you all may know very well. It is 0.51 hectares across. It is ferociously defended in its own way and a very impressive monument. We should be very proud of that monument, I should say. It is probably the best understood hill fort of all. But I have no doubt that Iron Age people did not think of those 2 things as the same thing. What they are is, we say that they are forts, and I think that there is some truth in that, and they are certainly usually on top of hills. But probably that defensive function wasn't the whole picture. More than anything, rather than a place of retreat, a place of hiding, these are central places within a landscape. They're the sort of nodes and the most important places in the landscape. We do see them where they're really defensively rubbish, it should be said. And actually, you find them often where you have really big ditches at the front, and then you go around the back, and it's a hedge. You know. Defence wasn't the only thing going on here. Probably more, it was about cultivating power and identity. It was about saying, we are important people, because have you seen how big our hill fort is? As Ken has pointed out, in the Bronze Age and the Neolithic beforehand, we cannot find settlement for love nor money. When you get to the Iron Age, every hill has a hill fort on it. And the big ones are often the early ones. You were no one if you didn't have a hill fort in the Iron Age. That's for sure. So as I say, it's about stamping yourself on the landscape, controlling it, and saying we are important. The Iron Age is the last bit of prehistory, or the bit before writing, as we call it, before the Romans arrive. You'll see it's the last sort of 700 years or so, and yes, it is really 43 AD, which is literally the stroke of Caesar's pen, which is when history begins. It's also the period of the Celts, which is what Toby talked about. And it is important to remember, you know, when we get those glimpses into actually how rich their culture was, and actually how established they were within the landscape. You know, these are not people who are struggling. You know, these are people building some of the biggest structures we ever see built in Britain, up until very recent times. Can we break it down a little bit? We do break it down in this part of the world. So we have promontory forts. I'm going to get to Pendinas in a minute, don't worry, I just thought I'd flesh it out a bit. We've got promontory forts, which are inland or coastal. These are where they just break off a little bit of the coastline and defend only a little bit of it. These may well be more associated with trade and that sort of thing. They seem to be used a bit longer. They're often quite early though. We have enclosed settlements, which are often much smaller and seem to develop a bit later. These are probably actually the breakdown of the importance of those hill forts we were talking about earlier. So actually, as we go through time, hill fort seems to lose their importance. You still want your own little enclosure, but it's not these massive enclosures we see originally. And then we've got the big ones, the hill forts proper. These definitions are from Ken, who was speaking beforehand, I should notice, and Fran, who was sat in the audience up until a few moments ago. And these are the big ones, broadly speaking. In West Wales, we have a lot of hill forts, but they are not as big as they get in South Britain. We probably have the most, but they tend to sort of a great density. We do have some big ones, though. These are two of the biggest, Pendinas, which we're going to talk about today, and Jenkins on the Preseli's. And I include that picture, which was done by the Cup project and Pembrokeshire Coast National Park. I'm just looking at Jess, who did it. And that's a really good reconstruction because it starts to show them as busy places, as full places. You often see reconstructions which are a bit green, and I think Castell Henllys, whilst a fantastic place to go visit, it does give you the sense of the rural idyll, which I think is probably the wrong way to be thinking of these things. These are the central, busy, smelly places. I like to think of hill forts as something like a market town with the cathedral and the market and the town all smushed into one. It would have been really quite a place to visit. As I said, we have a lot of them in Wales. This is the map of Wales. Arguably we have the most hill forts in the world, and you do get them all across the Atlantic facade. And this is us in West Wales, and we have the most in Wales, so we're doing pretty well. I will add in this arrow, which shows you where Pendinas is, slightly superfluous given where we are sat. And actually, this is Pendinas sat at the confluence over there, at the end of the day, at the confluence of the Rheidol and the Ystwyth on top of the hill. Its location is not a coincidence, that's for sure. Again, this is about control. We do think that hill forts are tiered to some extent. So you've got big hill forts controlling smaller hill forts, controlling smaller hill forts again. This was a big one, and we're looking at a society that may well be as complex enough as people controlling, say, northern Ceredigion, that kind of scale. So this is the fort itself. You can almost get this perspective as you walk out the building, although we're sort of on the other side of it. It is an amazing hill fort. It is absolutely enormous. It's about 4 hectares across. So again, you imagine Maiden Castle at 55 hectares, you get some really, really big ones. But it is absolutely formidably defended. You'll notice it's actually 2 forts. So you've got the southern fort here and the northern fort here, and then later it's joined together in its history. Pendinas is quite unusual. Quite often they're earth ramparts. This one very definitely is walled, although it does have ditches as well. And it's also one of its most distinctive features. Distinctive features are these enormous terraces, which are cut out of the hillside. They're not natural at all, and would have taken it is the scale of these constructions is quite hard to impress upon you. We're not the first people to have a pop at Pendinas. This is Daryll Forde in the 1930s. He's the man with a hat in the middle. I suspect that spade is mostly symbolic, I would say. And his excavations were they were a product of their time, is what we say these days. This is Daryll Forde looking more relaxed. And just to illustrate this, this is an enormous ditch that they're showing here, and we don't know where this was. We just don't know where it was. This isn't to ridicule him too much, particularly if we don't want to be ridiculed ourselves too much in the future. He was not standing on 100 years worth of innovation, but equally his biggest sin probably was that he never published. Actually, it took about 40 years into the 1960s before we got a publication, which was mostly second-hand knowledge, although they did talk to him about it, which was written up by the Royal Commission. Forde did propose a 4-stage chronology for the site, and that's this is his plan on the side here. So he thought that the North Fort was first, then that goes out of use, then the South Fort is built. They then rebuild the South Fort, and then they join them both together. That's what he proposed. Again, this chronology is somewhat of its time, and I would say it's almost certainly wrong. But equally, hill forts are big, and they are really difficult to understand, and he did not have scientific dating techniques that we have today. I would love to say that we proved that this chronology was wrong, but we can't say that. We can just say that with our understanding of hill forts today, almost always the big fort at the bottom, well, in this case at the bottom of the thing, is the main deal. That is the original fort, and then it's extended. And we quite often see that in hill forts. The reason we didn't go after that chronology is actually a fundamental shift in our values as archaeologists. Chronology hunting was very much a product of the 1930s. It's what they focused on during this time. There's nothing wrong with that, but archaeology is much more people-focused. We're much more interested in the people themselves. We can accept that people build hill forts. We can accept that people rebuild hill forts. That's not the most interesting question you can answer. Actually, what you want to look at is who these people were, what they were, why they did things, and that sort of thing. The project itself, moving forward in time, we'll leave Forde, but we will come back to the funnier photos that I could find. The project itself, as I say, came from the community with the Benparcau hub, which many of you will be familiar with, commissioning these 2 reports. This one by Trussell, which sort of set out what a community project might look like. I think we can say that it is a possibility now. It is feasible, as it were. And then they commissioned a geophysical survey, which is, again, that X-ray beneath the ground that Toby talked about earlier. And this found much of the things you would expect within a hill fort, hut platforms and that sort of thing. It was at this point that Heneb, or Dyfed Archaeological Trust, that at this point became involved, seeing the community enthusiasm, driving it forward and bringing in actually Cadw as a funder, who are very keen on it. So I'll talk a bit about our excavations. We actually did 3 excavations, the first of which was funded by Cadw. As I say, that's when we became involved. After that, and it being such a big success, the Pendinas project proper was sort of formulated and came about. That was a national lottery fund, National Heritage Lottery Fund application, which was in partnership with the Royal Commission. That's when Becker came involved and it became a much, much larger enterprise. So the first excavation we did was down there. We then went to the North Gate and then we went back to the South Gate. But I'm going to describe two of the excavations together because otherwise I'm going to fall over. So this is the South Gate as we understood it before the excavations. This is a really nice drawing by Toby Driver. His signature is at the bottom, but it's not blurred when you look on my thing, but it is blurred here. Just to give you a sense of the scale of what we're talking about. We're talking about big walls, again, a place designed to impress, not that rural idyll that you might think. This is our trench. It is as spectacular a place for an archaeological trench as you can imagine. And this is me posing, pretending to draw at the front. And this is Forde's trench from the 1930s. It is almost exactly the same place we're talking about. And our strategy, certainly in these early excavations, was to find Forde's trenches, which was a task unto itself, and then work away from them. So understand what Forde found and how much we can rely on them, and then work away towards new archaeological deposits. These are the sort of things we're working with from Forde. Again, there is nothing wrong with them, but they are difficult, and I think if you look at our records before they're published, they're pretty difficult to understand. This is what made it into the 1960s journal article, which is pretty basic, I would say. This is our plan of what we found. I will run you through what we found quite quickly, and this is just an aerial shot to show you sort of a bit of what it looked like. So the sort of features we were looking at were so this is the revetment walling. This is from above. This is one of the enormous post holes, and this is the edge of Forde's trench, so you sort of slice through it, frustratingly. But you know, this is a big gate post for the original entrance. This is the revetment walling that Forde found, and this is the revetment walling that we found. We did realise at this point that the photographs were taken in the mid part of the excavation, and he kept on digging. So actually, over here, this is gone, but that's okay, that's not a problem. This is my favourite photograph of all of Forde's, and that's for the health and safety violations as much as anything. I'd note Forde's hat has made a reappearance, but of course what you've all spotted is the two young boys posing for scale. I'm not sure how many of you have noticed the fence post here and here, which is actually holding up the revetment wall that towers over these poor boys, and the stones scattered on the top. I mean, I think that's phenomenal. I wish I could get away with that sort of thing, but unfortunately not. This is how it looks today. We didn't go quite as deep, so this is looking sort of out towards Benparcau beneath. This is what's called Dinas Terrace or something. And looking out, but it is still very well preserved. This is actually the original roadway into the fort. What we did think originally was that you walked into the fort and went straight up the hill. Upon taking the top off, we realised very quickly that was not the case. Actually, the road turned left and right. And what you were being shown, in a sense, are hut platforms. We call them hut platforms. They don't always have huts on them, but this is where they have cut into the hillside to make flat places to build houses, workshops, whatever. This one we didn't know was here because it was under one of Forde's spoil heaps. Basically, it was completely hidden. It was a very nice thing. Just to give you a sense of how 3D this is. This is me taking a drone shot. So this is about 7 foot tall. This one has actually been cut off by the terrace, which I showed at the beginning, which is actually probably a later addition. And you can see through the middle, there's an amazing stone line drain that drains through the middle. This is it as it was. That was completely sealed by the floor, and that highlights one of the reasons that doing excavations in places like this is so important, and that's because we so rarely see the floors and those upper deposits. That is a lovely, soothing ringtone. I can't remember what I was going to say then. So mostly, a bit like Gyda'r, we have a lot, ploughing is everywhere at the end of the day. This has been saved basically from being in a hollow for 2,000 years. So just doing one of these is so valuable, because archaeologists love gunk. They love the environmental stuff that you get in drains, in floors, what's left after human occupation. We didn't find a hearth, which is unusual. These probably were domestic buildings, is where we ended up. But, we certainly didn't have any evidence of industrial stuff going on. You can see the entrance in the background there. But it is just inside the entrance, and they do seem to have roundhouses, which we think this was, sort of lining the hillside up. So if you imagine coming through that gate, you'd have been greeted by banks of houses going up the hill. It would have actually been quite a scary thing. Now, I feel quite hard done by today, because Toby and to some extent Ken have described the richest Iron Age finds ever found in West Wales. The Iron Age is very poor on finds generally. There is a great paucity of finds when doing archaeology. The archaeology itself is very rich, but we don't find the remains of much of their material culture. We don't really know why that is. You do get pottery and that sort of thing in other parts of the world. In this part of the world, it's very finds poor. That's not to say they didn't have anything. It's more likely that it wasn't preserved. So if they're not using pottery, they're probably using wood and baskets and that sort of thing, things that are rarely preserved in the archaeological record. Our finds here look like that, broadly speaking, so 3 round things. They're not all the same, I would note. This is Julie, very happy with her round thing. The 2 on the left, or certainly the one on the far left, is almost certainly a spindle wheel. So this is for the spinning of yarn, a very common archaeological find, a very nice archaeological find, I should add. The one in the middle and the one on the right are probably beads. The one in the middle is stone, the one on the right is amber. Although it looks like sort of a slightly chocolatey hobnob thing these days, it is actually amber. To put it in perspective, I've tried to go on a bit about how civilized these people were and how advanced they were. The nearest good source of amber that was reliable and that you would expect a bead to be made of is sort of the Baltic or the Northern Sea. So these are people trading not just across countries, across continents in many cases. And this, I'm not sure why I put that one in. Oh, that's why, I remember. So you may have noticed that I didn't mention this little slot trench at the top. And this is the bit we went back to in following seasons. And this was actually just a little trial trench to work out whether it was worth going back. Was this one the same as that one? Was it going to be the same again? Just to give you a sense of what it looked like. So this was our 2021 trench. This is our second trench on that. And you can see that across the fort there are more of these things. This really would have been a bank of houses across the way. This one was very different, I would say. It had many more features and seems to have been used for a much longer period of time. These are the volunteers cleaning it off. It was quite hard to clean, it must be said. There was about 1 metre of soil on top of the archaeological remains. This is Marion, a staff member, who still hates me for putting this photo up. But there we go, and there's Becca, the community archaeologist, and I can see several other people here, Alex being one of them, and I think Anne's in there somewhere, cleaning back. This is that trial trench. First feature, of course, you find is the trial trench you dug last year. You'll notice we do also put a little finger trench down here to look at a later one, and there's actually another one coming around here that we didn't look at in great detail. So this is it. Again, the first thing we came down onto was the floor, much better preserved in this one. It's sort of a yard surface, what we call a metalled surface, a pounded stone surface. It doesn't look great, but it's actually a really good surface for use. And then we found lots and lots of post holes and a drain, again, beneath the floor levels. There was 2 drains, one that went through here, in sort of a trapezoid shape, and then one that went all the way around the outside and drained on the hut beneath it, which must have been very unpleasant, but there we go. I don't think there was much neighbourly civility in that sense. Some of the post holes are very big, some of them are very small. This is, again, in the 3D. It's quite a difficult thing to show because it's all so wonky. We all had very sore ankles going up and down by the end of it. These are what the post holes look like. This is actually the same post hole that's been reset several times. So you can imagine in the middle there would have been a big post partly holding the roof up. And again, some of them were massive. This one here was almost certainly where the door was. So, you know, and led on sort of a balcony-esque sort of area outside. Nice, very nice as well. Could watch the sun come up. There was a bit of stone line drain. Not all the drain here was lined. I think it actually went out of use later on. But again, it's very much the same picture, although this one seems to have been rebuilt and rebuilt and rebuilt. I should also say this one is a bit bigger, importantly. There were also sort of the leftovers of day-to-day activity. These are pits. Unfortunately, they're not special pits like Ken's pits that he was talking about. They're more domestic pits, little bits of burnt stone, little bits of charcoal, little bits of animal bone. Again, just that kind of leftover stuff. And this is that finger trench I talked about that just looks at the next one, plunging off the edge. Again, a slightly health and safety conscious in the Iron Age as well. This is Forde doing what we were doing. He excavated 2 or 3. We don't quite know. We don't know that much about it either. This one had a hearth in the middle. It's the only hearth we've ever seen, but our understanding of what the outer edge of this one looks isn't very good. This is just something to note. This is OSL dating, which is optical. That's it. Thank you, Ebert. Underneath the tarp is a world-leading expert. Basically, what this looks at is the last times that quartz was exposed to the sun. So if you expose it to the sun, it was yesterday or whatever. So you have to do it under cover of tarpaulin, much to the amusement of everyone around it. We were doing this in a howling gale, so I think the world-leading expert was quite happy. Everyone standing around for 30 minutes was less happy. The finds from this one included slingshots. You know, if you imagine, there's famous Celts drawings out there of people throwing things, and actually Forde found caches of them behind the ramparts. Very nice as well. These are some of the stone objects. Again, a few more spindle wheels, another couple of beads. But I mean, you could hold the entire assemblage from this site within your hands, except for this, which is a saddle quern, which is again for the preparation of bread or the grinding of wheat. So going back to this picture, we do have quite a good sense of when this hut was mainly used. And that's between about 400 and 200 BC. That seems to be pretty much consistent, and actually looking at the defences I showed you earlier, they date from almost exactly the same period, and we think actually there's almost all of the remains we found during the excavation date from that period. It wouldn't surprise me if there was a big remodel. We didn't see anything earlier. We suspect there is stuff that's earlier. It's just, as I say, unlike Forde, we are bound by health and safety, and bottom of ditches and under ramparts are very difficult places to look at these days. We have put together some sort of reconstruction of what we would have thought they look like. Hut platforms are quite common, but we very rarely excavate them. It's usually, again, they're protected, and excavations of this magnitude are rarely undertaken. We think they were much more hunkered down than we thought. We used to think that they were sort of round houses on the platform, but actually I think now by the end of this excavation we're fairly convinced that they were almost sort of built into the hillside somewhat. So it would have been, I don't know, some kind of sort of hill village sort of look, but incredibly dense. Again, I'd like to go back to the fact that this is a community archaeology project, and that actually there are 2 products to this excavation, and one is our actual knowledge. The second one is actually people starting to engage and understand the past. I note Lynn in the audience here, who, believe it, oh, there is a kite at the end of this.
Yeah.
I realise it's cut out now, but there we go. It was a gale on that day, as you can imagine, but there we go. It took almost a week to backfill the trench, so we were all pretty tired. Moving now to the northern gateway, here we went about things quite differently. We went for much smaller trenches and more of them, and that's because, again, so you've got the North Fort here, and we're at the top of the South Fort. The reason we went for this strategy was the complexity of Forde's excavations, which were significant. So we spent most of our time trying to work out where we are. We also wanted to answer the questions we wanted to answer was, how does the north bit of the fort relate to the south bit of the fort that we understood quite well? This is Forde's excavations. As I say, incredibly complex. This was the style of the time. He wasn't going sort of on his own. And again, these are the amazing walls that he found. It would be amazing to excavate on this scale, but no luck, unfortunately. And this is it from the air and how it looks today. We had one bit of luck here, and that's this little hawthorn bush, which still exists. This is just the other side of it, which gave us our first inn. And within here, you start to see the revetment walling. This has got river rounded cobbles in it, you may notice. That's a really interesting thing. The nearest river is at the bottom of the hill. Why on earth they were bothering to do that, we don't know, especially when they were quarrying huge amounts of stone from the fort anyway. This is Ken recording what we now know to be what I call a Fordian intervention, which is a Forde trench, which at the bottom we start to get metal and glass in. Another tarp full of specialists, as it were, this on a slightly nicer day. And all of this work, again, this is going through, this is the counterscarps of the outer side of the defences, this trench, and this one looking at the inside of the defences. This produced some... Oh. I ruined my next gag, that's really what it is. This revealed basically that those defences, the northern part of the fort, they all date to the same date as the stuff we saw at the south. So it's all this activity seems to be roughly between about 400 and 200 BC. I would note, getting to where I wanted to go, that we did all of these excavations in March and September due to the constraints of the wildlife. I'm not sure if anyone has put a toilet back upright. It is one of the experiences of being an archaeologist. We also did 3 excavations and we lost 3 tents to the fort. But here is Forde again in the 1930s. Here's the team in almost exactly the same spot, and then going back to those earlier volunteers in the sun. Again, it was fairly brief, the sun at times. We did do some geophysics. We established that actually there's outer defences beyond the outer defences, so that's pretty exciting as well. You can see how many of these little platforms there are. We think 70 or 80. There really is a lot here. And we also did this massive topographical survey, or rather Louise did, of the Royal Commission. Putting all this together, we got basically a couple of publications. This one will be in Archaeologica Cambrensis, the Welsh journal. We also produced this very nice booklet, which is a free booklet and is on the table outside, I believe. So do please take one home. I'll say thank you and leave you with our reconstruction of what we think it looked like during this time. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much, Luke. And I was up there a few times when you were digging, and I can attest to the reason why Iron Age huts feature large drains. Lots of water. There's time for a couple of questions for Luke. So who would like... The gentleman on the front here.
during the excavation of the north gate of the south fort, a piece of glass was found. Has that been dated now?
It has, and you're not going to like my answer. It ain't that old. That was the Fordian intervention that I mentioned, unfortunately. We thought it may be quite an old glass, a glass from Italy, which you do find in the medieval period, and we were sort of wondering whether it might be a medieval reoccupation of the site. It ain't. That's the hard truth of it. I think it might be another wine bottle.
Further questions? Was there a hand? Did I see a hand at the back somewhere? Yes.
Yeah, is there anywhere online where we can look at these presentations again? Yes. Address?
Yes, they'll be on the YouTube channel.
With the YouTube channel, its name, sorry?
Jenna, do you want to answer this one?
It'll be on the Heneb one and on the Royal Commission one.
Okay.
On YouTube, so if you just search by the Heneb or Royal Commission, they'll be on there.
Okay.
So we hope to get them up in the next week or so. Okay.
Are there any online questions? Are there any further questions from the audience? In that case, I think we'll say thank you very much, Luke, for a comprehensive look at a fantastic project here in Aberystwyth.